Hey, good afternoon. 506 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mark Morgan is with us, former acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection this hour. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, crazy day. We're just looking at the text of this thing, this bill that they say is an immigration bill. It's going to fix the immigration system. It's going to make it worse. And really, that's the smallest portion of it. $60 billion is for Ukraine's border, where the money is actually going to secure a border. How about that for an insult? Let's see here. And we're still getting calls on this subject, so I do want to take one. I've got Jim calling in from, I think he's on Route 66 right now. Hello, Jim. Good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it. I listen to you on a regular basis.
Thank you, Jim.
So now I'm 63 years old. I'll just share that with you. So I've been following some of these news stories for quite a long time, including abortion. My dad was an OBGYN, and so at a very young age, I learned the truth about abortion. And I remember as a young man or an old teen thinking to myself, one day this country is going to wake up and realize that an entire generation of employees is missing. And as I've been thinking about it, it dawned on me that one of the reasons why all these administrations keep allowing immigrants, illegal immigrants, to just flood our borders is to cover up and to kind of, fill the gap, as it were. So as to take the spotlight off of the horrendous abortion industry, destroying our future generations by just bringing in replacement people.
Yeah, it's a numbers game, isn't it? So so abortions in the United States historically have been about 1 million a year, about 1 million on average. And wouldn't you know it, the number of legal immigrants we allow into the United States each year, 1 million. Same number.
How about that?
And now we're stacking right on top of that, just millions and millions of illegal immigrants. So the native population's being encouraged to kill their children off while they open the border and allow foreign nationals to pour across it. So you're totally right about that. And at the center of that is a lot of this corporate influence that I was just talking about, and you're talking about now, Jim, which is that these corporations, how many of them are pushing abortion on their employees? A lot. A lot. In fact, they are desperate to keep women from leaving the workplace. In fact, they encourage them to abort their children. They say they'll pay to help them abort their children. They'll pay for the travel. You can go wherever you want, abort the child, just as long as you're back at work on Monday. That's the game plan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, that's just a whole other show, right?
Yeah.
What has the encouragement of women to not raise children but to go into the workforce, what has that done to our economy? That's just a whole other show right there.
Oh, it's a huge deal. It's made it so that it's almost impossible for an American family to survive on one income. That's the truth. And it is the truth. Yeah. It's led to like a massive arms race actually that has diminished the whole economy. So it's a wild thing, and and corporations are pushing it because they like having all these loyal workers who stay chained to their desks, and also all these consumers. That's the most important thing you can be as a result, and it's just led to a disaster, and especially most importantly, where the government is connected to these companies. That's the real sin. It's the cronyism of it all. So where a company can dictate a piece of legislation, where these companies dictate legislation that includes, like open the border, have all this cheap labor pour in, don't have any E-Verify, allow people to work at a corporation regardless of their status as a citizen, all of that. That's where the most destructive stuff comes through.
Right. I would be more than willing to spend that $40 billion or whatever it is we're sending to Ukraine, or whatever money we're spending
60
to house illegal immigrants. I would rather take that money down to some of the South American countries or other countries that are in need of assistance and help them build their nation.
Yeah, although we have tried that to the tune of many, many, many billions of dollars. And the unfortunate thing is, as usual, just like in Gaza, the money actually gets stolen. It's a totally corrupt process, unfortunately. And we seem to never learn the lessons from that.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true, and it's because of mismanagement. And I'll just say I work at a federal agency, and I see mismanagement all the time.
Yeah, that's the story I keep hearing for everyone who does the kind of jobs that you do. Jim, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I appreciate your call today, sir. Jim's right. Jim's right. You're watching. We're aborting Americans and importing the whole planet. And who does that serve? Is that us? Does it? I don't think so. I don't think so. We've got Anita calling in from Warrenton, line 4. Anita, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. Hey, speaking of foreign aid, we give billions and billions of dollars of foreign aid for decades now to various countries around the world. Part of it, I guess, was to help to improve the citizens' lives in those countries. And I was thinking, if we had an administration that really cared, for every Ecuadorian who came across the border illegally, or every Senegalese who came across the border illegally, we deducted $10 million per person from that aid package to that country.
Yes, that's a brilliant idea. That's a great idea, Anita. So we impose a monetary penalty on these countries whose citizenry are pouring into our country as a way to make it so that they keep their people there.
Yeah, we're giving them all this money, and then we're spending even more money once they get into this country illegally.
Yeah.
What
are we getting for all this cash? No, that's actually the core of a lot of the Trump disputes with these international organizations in other countries. Like, wait a second. So I could pick any random country, whether it's South Korea or whether we talk about organizations like NATO or the United Nations. And Trump kept asking the questions you're not allowed to ask, which is, wait a second. We're giving you all this money. What are we getting in return for this? What is this deal exactly? And just asking that question, first of all, it's a public service. And secondly, it drove the globalist class crazy. Absolutely nuts that he would ask a question like that. But good for him. He was the first president in a very long time to ask a question like that. It's long overdue. Anita, thank you very much. Let me get to Mitch McConnell now, just so you can hear what it sounds like when he mumbles. Mitch McConnell today urging people to support this giant Ukraine package that also includes, hurting America's immigration system even more. Here he is today.
This is a humanitarian and security crisis of historic proportions.
Oh, okay.
And Senate Republicans have insisted, not just for months, but for years, that this urgent crisis demanded action.
Uh-oh.
3 months ago, we asked our colleague, Senator Langford, to lead that action. In just the time since Washington Democrats finally decided to join him at the...
Okay, I'm sorry. You know something? I think this needs a little bit of musical assistance because this is not good enough on its own. So some musical assistance for Mitch McConnell. Here we go.
3 months ago, we asked our colleague, Senator Langford, to lead that action. In just the time since Washington Democrats finally decided to join him at the negotiating table, the president's border crisis made history all over again. December saw the highest daily and monthly tallies of illegal border crossings ever on record. The crisis has literally never been worse. This is the reality as the Senate begins careful consideration of the border security agreement announced last night. The gaping hole in our nation's sovereign borders on President Biden's watch is not going to heal itself. And the crater...
It really does give you a perspective on, how does something like this happen? Well, maybe he just bored everybody to death. They're like, fine, I surrender. Uncle, I'll support your bill. I don't even know what you're saying. I'll support it. So that's the good faith explanation for why any Republican got behind this. There are a growing number of Republicans who are against it. That's some of the good news. Certainly in the House, led by Speaker Mike Johnson, they're very against this. Newsweek has helpfully put together a list of the Senate Republicans trying to kill the border bill. Now, I don't know if Newsweek was attempting to be helpful. I think they want people to read Newsweek to the extent that happens anymore, and then hector these Republicans into supporting this bill, which is, again, a big Ukraine bill. But actually, it ends up being like a list of heroes. Ready? Here are the Republican senators who are now publicly opposed to this. Here's the list. Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee says she will not support this deal and never vote to make illegal immigration legal. Good for her. Ted Cruz of Texas, who goes back and forth for me. Sometimes he votes for things, and I'm like, what are you doing? He reauthorized, remember FISA spying on the American people? He did that at the end of last year. I was like, Ted Cruz? Why would Ted Cruz do that? That was a stupid vote, but luckily he's making a smart vote here. He says he's against it. He said, what? Did he censor this for real? He said he wrote on Twitter, 2 weeks ago at a Senate press conference, I said this deal was a stinking pile of C, and then he censors it. What could he possibly be saying? I think he means crap. You're allowed to say crap, Ted Cruz. It turns out my assessment was too generous, he wrote. I got to censor the word crap. Don't be a Boy Scout. You can say crap. Steve Daines of Montana is against this. Steve Daines became the first member of Republican leadership to oppose the bill today. Good for him. He said, quote, I can't support a bill that doesn't secure the border, obviously, provides taxpayer-funded lawyers to illegal immigrants, and gives billions to radical open borders groups. I am a no, he says. Josh Hawley of Missouri. He says it's an open borders bill, he announced last night in opposing it. He ripped the bill for placing no new restrictions on unaccompanied minors arriving at the border and providing expedited work permits to so-called undocumented immigrants. This border deal is a huge middle finger to working people, said Hawley. The cheap labor machine keeps on running. What are we saying, huh? Huh? Hawley gets it. It's about that. Ron Johnson of Wisconsin wrote in a post on X that the bill, quote, appears even worse than we feared. Mike Lee of Utah, you know by now, he's already been one of the best on this. He's given us all sorts of summaries on the crap that's in this bill. Sorry, Ted Cruz, didn't mean to make a swear word on the air. But, quote, Senate GOP leadership screwed this up and screwed us, said Mike Lee. Even while refusing to let us see the bill, they claimed to be negotiating on our behalf for months. They were never in doubt, insisting we'd be dumb and even unpatriotic not to support it. This is a disqualifying betrayal, says Mike Lee. Rand Paul says this bill is anti-American. Quote, amazing. This predictable revelation is only a week old, and yet the swamp's new border security bill gives Ukraine $60 billion more. From the squandering of your money to the fake border reforms, it's safe to declare this bill anti-American. Marco Rubio, this is kind of an interesting one, because remember Rubio a decade ago was involved in that stupid Gang of Eight immigration amnesty package alongside Lindsey Graham. Remember the phrase Gramnesty that was going around at the time? Yeah. Rubio was a part of that back then. I think Rubio maybe he's listening to voters or something. Maybe that's what's happened. He's changed for sure. He said this deal is an easy no. It reads like the parody of an actual border security bill, he wrote. Rick Scott of Florida is against this. He says it looks more like an immigration bill, not a border security bill. Eric Schmidt of Missouri called on Republicans to stand firm to stop it. Quote, this bill is worse than advertised. The Democrats are celebrating big wins for the open borders crowd. Tommy Tuberville, the great Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, Coach Tuberville, is warning that the bill, quote, destroys American sovereignty. He said he's an immovable no. By the way, I'm reading these because I know sometimes you get disheartened with the quality of Republican leadership. There are some Republicans, at least on this issue, and certainly many more in the case of many of these guys, who are stand-up guys who actually are listening to their voters. Tommy Tuberville among them. Quote, it will weaken immigration laws for decades and handcuff the next president that actually wants to secure our borders and defend our country. This bill has been crafted to solidify the invasion of illegals into the United States of America. J.D. Vance is opposed. He asked why any Republican would even vote for this. The border, he cited Senator Chris Murphy, the Democrat from Connecticut, who said, quote, the border never closes. This is Chris Murphy trying to convince Democrat voters to support this. The electorate. The border never closes. Don't worry. Vance said, I can understand why Chris Murphy supports it. I cannot imagine why any Republican supports this atrocious proposal. That's the end of the Newsweek list, but that's a good start. Not enough. You may notice that the numbers there, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What's the head count? Did you have a whip count on this, Corey? Oh, we have 18. Okay, so not everybody included here, but 18 Republicans so far. Still not enough. We need more to speak up. More to speak up. Take a phone call here. I've got Mike calling in from Sunshine, line 4. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Mike. Mike, can you hear me? I think he's got a bad signal. You hear that sound? It's a weird sound. One more time. Mike. Hey, Mike.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Vince.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Brett Weinstein was on Tucker Carlson recently, and everyone needs to watch that video. He went to the Darien Gap in Panama, where everybody from South America is going through that gap. And he mentioned that he went to different camps, and he says that we're experiencing both a migration and an invasion. He said some of the camps were all Hispanics, and they were friendly, and they were talkative. And then he found one camp that was full of Asians. He thought they were Chinese, and they were very tight-lipped. Everyone has to watch that interview with Brett Weinstein.
I've dog-eared that interview. I have not yet watched it. I've watched a lot of Tucker's interviews. Haven't seen the Brett Weinstein. I like him though. I'll take your advice. I'll watch that, Mike. But it's amazing what's happening. And it's not, 60 Minutes had a big report on it this weekend about how it's the Chinese government that is enabling a lot of this. Tik Tok convincing illegals to pour into the United States. Listen to this.
We wondered how all of these migrants knew about this particular entryway into California. The answer was in their hands.
How do you know about that? Oh, Douyin. Okay, TikTok.
Oh, you learned on TikTok. Yeah. TikTok is a social media platform created in China. The post we found had step-by-step instructions for hiring smugglers and detailed directions to that hole we visited. We were struck by just how orderly and routine it all seemed.
Amazing.
The migrants walked about a half mile down a dirt road and waited in line for U.S. Border Patrol to arrive so they could surrender.
Isn't that amazing? So you've got the Chinese Communist Party using a technology in order to lead mercenaries on an invasion of the United States of America. And we still got people scratching their heads. What's happening? What's happening to our country right now? And China gets to do it from afar. Move a couple ones and zeros around and see if we could wreck the whole United States of America. Seems to be working. Coming up, Mark Morgan talks to us about the state of play on our border. He was responsible for handling it under the Trump administration. He joins us next. Good afternoon to you. It's 5:34 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The governors of the various states assembled on our southern border this past weekend. Not all of them. There's nearly half of the states in the country are giving their support to Texas right now to help secure the border. And it's been good, actually. Greg Abbott has had some success. They've locked down all of the people who are trying to get across the border in the parts that Texas is managing. In fact, Greg Abbott was on with Maria Bartiromo this weekend. Here's what he said.
The area where we have occupied this park in Eagle Pass, Texas, that we put up the razor wire, there used to be 3,000 or 4,000 people crossing that area a day. For the past 3 days, we've averaged just 3 people crossing that area.
Wow.
The point is, if we put up resistance, we show that we can secure the border. Joe Biden should not be stopping that.
Yeah, holy cow. What kind of circus freaks were the people who got across the concertina wire? The 3 of them. You know what I mean? Like, that's unbelievable. How'd they managed that? Greg Abbott was standing alongside 14 Republican governors who joined him on the border this weekend.
And I applaud and thank the members of the governors who are with us here today.
Yeah, and here, for instance, is Brian Kemp of Georgia.
We are here with our fellow governors today, standing with you and many governors that are not, because every state in our country now is a border state because of what we're happening. When you think about the amount of fentanyl, human trafficking that's coming, they're coming to every state in the country, and every governor's having to deal with it. 458 million lethal doses of fentanyl that have been detained at this border. Think about the doses that were not.
Yeah, that's the real story of what's happening. Here with more is Mark Morgan, former acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the Trump administration and a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Ben, thanks for having me.
Did you ever think you'd live to see the day when the federal government abandoned control of our borders and it was left to the states to figure out a way to hold things together?
Well, I think it's a degree of chaos. I knew, because during the campaign, I mean, it was clear what Biden was going to do. I mean, he announced what he was going to do, right? He was going to dismantle the network of tools, authorities, and policies we had. Even I back then, Vince, I didn't realize the depth and magnitude that they were going to intentionally, put on our borders to really destroy them. So they exceeded even my expectations.
Sure. Is that how you interpret this legislation that was presented to us last night as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Vince, this is not a serious border security bill. At the end of the day, this is a gift to the cartels, the Biden administration's continued open border policies, the NGOs, and sanctuary cities. And Vince, what's very frustrating, look, I don't want to impugn the integrity or intentions of Senator Lankford, but what I can tell you, though, and what I will say, is what he's saying this bill does, it's not accurate. He's being at best disingenuous, but at least misleading, especially on a couple of fronts, like catch and release. He continues to say that it ends catch and release, and that's just a flat-out lie.
That seems to be one of the most important elements here. The media are running around today saying that this legislation would end catch and release. And in the eyes of most people, when you hear that phrase, what that typically means is you catch an illegal immigrant crossing into our country, and then you release them into our country. That has been the practice of the Biden administration. The claim is that the legislation would end catch and release. What does it really do, Mark Morgan?
It does the opposite. It actually codifies the Flores Settlement Agreement, and that really is an order from a single judge that said if you're unaccompanied minor or your family, you cannot be detained more than 20 days, and that in part's what really started catch and release. Well, what this proposal does, not only does it not end catch and release, but it actually codifies the Florida Settlement Agreement, meaning if you're an unaccompanied minor or family, it guarantees your release. But it even goes further than that. What they're trying to do, Vince, they're actually trying to rewrite the definition of detention. So what they're saying is what they're calling ending release is non-custodial removal proceedings. Let me say that again. Non-custodial removing proceedings. Most intellectually honest people means that means they're being released.
Not in custody. Exactly non-custodial means not in custody.
It's exactly, Vince. It's that simple. And so get this. So a family comes across. Let's say they are an adult comes across. They don't satisfy the credible fear claim. Well, then what they're going to do is they're going to tell American people, well, we've enrolled them in expedited removal proceedings. Oh, but while we wait for them going through the proceedings, we're going to place them in non-custodial removal proceedings, which means they're being released into the United States while they're pending the removal. It's the same thing. They're lying to the American people.
So wait, Mark Morgan, you're helping to call my attention to something that I have not dwelled on, and I should have probably, which is that it sounds to me that if this legislation were to become law, that the child trafficking crisis would dramatically accelerate.
Exactly, because I encourage everybody. There's 370 pages, but I'll give you a page number. Page 116. It'll take you 30 seconds. It actually says that aliens, this is their term, aliens referred for the non-custodial removal proceedings under this section shall be released from physical custody. So they're saying that they're ending catch and release, but the language in their own bill, page 116, says they shall be released from physical custody. And what that means is we're going to see what we saw in 2019, because they're going to continue to release families into this country. So what do you think is going to happen? They're going to continue to have the cartels and the illegal aliens form fake families to hopefully, because if they come to our border as a family, that's their guaranteed automatic passport to be released into the country, just like it has been.
Yes.
And then to your point, unaccompanied minors. So in the past 36 months, there have been 476,000 unaccompanied minors in 36 months. So the unaccompanied minors will continue to be released, and that's absolutely going to cause continued trafficking, as you just described.
Who are those unaccompanied minors released to?
So the process goes, Border Patrol releases them to HHS, and then HHS finds them a, quote, sponsor anywhere in the United States. They're automatically released, and we never hear from them again.
No, we don't. And we've seen the stories of who these sponsors often are, and they include sweatshops and basically putting these children in slave labor conditions in order to pay off debts to the cartels.
That's exactly right, Vince. There's an old saying we say that a good portion of the illegal aliens coming in, that they're being smuggled, they're also being trafficked. They just don't know it yet, especially the unaccompanied alien children. And again, 476,000 in the past 36 months. They're going to continue to release them, which will continue to incentivize them to come. And oh, by the way, that break glass removal authority, UACs aren't counted in the 5,000.
Yeah, so if Democrats, I think it's interesting, they're now using the phrase crisis to describe what's happening on the border because they're trying to transfer, they know they can't hide it anymore, so they want to transfer responsibility to Republicans. But if you were actually trying to address the crisis, wouldn't you present a piece of legislation or exercise power, if you're Biden, designed to minimize the rape, murder, drugs, and human trafficking going on our border?
Exactly, and that's another part I get so frustrated because that's exactly what the Republicans presented in H.R. 2. By the way, all Republican senators, including Senator Langsford, voted for it. And what did Chuck Schumer do? He sat on that bill for over 250 days. So I don't want to hear that the Republicans have not tried to present a congressional legislative pathway to secure the border. They did. It was H.R. 2. And it's the Democrats that refused to even put that on the floor.
Yes.
And I mean, the 5,000, first of all, remember it was Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security under then President Obama and Vice President Biden, that said 1,000 was a bad day. 1,000. We are actually now increasing that by 5 times as the threshold break glass before that additional authority can be implemented. Why are we doing that, Vince?
And that authority is still optional, isn't it? It's a kind of arbitrary. It's up to whether or not Mayorkas, of all people, wants to even invoke it.
Correct. That's right. So that's another big, I believe, intentional misdirection that's being said about this bill. So first of all, they can exempt, Mayorkas can exempt anyone they want from the emergency authority. Biden can suspend the emergency authority. Mayorkas can suspend it. And the emergency authority, it's limited in time and duration. I mean, each year it goes down to how many days they can apply it. So every time in this that you see something that looks really tough, the issue is read the next 2 or 3 or 5 pages. The exceptions overrule what looks like originally a tough rule.
Right. Yeah, like for instance, they say they want to accelerate asylum claims. They say they want to get them done in 90 days or whatever. But they include weasel language around the 90 days to suggest that as long as it's practicable or whatever. It's like if possible within 90 days, but it still might take years.
Well, that's exactly right, Ben. And then in addition to that, the 90 days, think about what they've done. So that sounds really tough on its face, but guess what they've done? In this law, it actually codifies the asylum rule that Biden is trying to push through, which guess what happens? No ICE attorneys are involved in the proceedings. So there could be there's no evaluation by an independent judge because they're gone. They've completely removed the adversarial nature. There's no cross-examined by ICE attorneys. So that rule takes all that out. By the way, there's 12 states that are actually filing suit on that rule. And what this bill does, it codifies that rule.
What do you make of this decision to say that it should be the D.C. court system that handles all of the disputes in this law?
Again, what starts to sound tough, again, this is part of the loopholes, right, that they're going through. This is nothing more than to absolutely streamline. They're going to say it limits their process, their appeal process. And that's just not true. I mean, they've put process on top of process on top of process. So once somebody is either put in non-custodial removal proceedings or they're released because they passed a credible fear, the same thing's going to happen. They're never going to be removed, and the data shows that. ICE's own life cycle report shows that if they are released, 82% of those that are released are never, ever deported.
Yeah. So we're in store for a lot more of that if this thing were to ever become law. The other piece is that, this is supposed to be, they sold it to us as some sort of border fix. In reality, the only border they're actually being tough on is the one between Ukraine and Russia. They're giving $60 billion to Ukraine in a package that also provides $20 billion to bring foreign nationals into America.
That's exactly right. And think about this. People need to remember this is a supplemental. So we're asking right now for billions and billions of dollars, and then when it comes to the regular appropriations process, they're going to ask for more money. So when it comes to the border, this is supposed to be a border security bill, right? Well, $7 billion is going to go to sanctuary cities and NGOs and towards processing.
Right.
Alone $1.4 billion alone is for FEMA grants that provide shelter, and almost $40 million to provide attorney's fees, all paid for by the United States taxpayers. So it's also, I take exception that they put anything in there about border security, because the overwhelming majority of the funding is going towards anything but actual border security.
Amazing. One last element for you. Today, it seemed to me kind of an unusual statement from the Border Patrol Union. Have you seen this? They released a statement today saying that they were okay with this deal, which is interesting. They say it's not perfect, but it's better than the status quo. Let me quote from this first, and then I'll get your reaction to it. They say, since Joe Biden has been in office, Customs and Border Protection has averaged over 6,700 apprehensions per day. The vast majority have been released under a policy known as catch and release. Approximately 60% of all border apprehensions are single adults, a good number of whom are men of military age. The Border Act of 2024 will codify into law authorities that U.S. Border Patrol agents never had in the past. This will allow us to remove single adults expeditiously and without a lengthy judicial review, which historically has required the release of these individuals into the interior of the United States. This alone will drop illegal border crossings nationwide and will allow a great many of our agents to get back to detecting and apprehending those who want to cross our borders illegally and evade apprehension. While not perfect, the Border Act of 2024 is a step in the right direction and is far better than the status quo, which is why the National Border Patrol Council endorses this bill. What do you make of that view? Certainly the Border Patrol Union, no one can accuse them of being weak on the border. They certainly have wanted much better out of the Biden administration. They say it loudly every day. Do they have a point here? Are they wrong about this?
Look, generally, the union, I'm tracking what they're saying on this one, Vince. Look, and my fight is not with the union. My fight is actually against the Senate Republicans that are actually saying that this bill is the answer. But I respectfully disagree with that interpretation. I think I just don't. First of all, as we discussed thoroughly, it does not end catch and release. And part of what it's going to do is, so you're going to see about 65% are single adults. Mark my words, what we're going to see is we're going to see a shift in the demographics back to in 2019, where we had about 68% that were families and unaccompanied minors, because those demographics are going to be continued to be caught and released in the United States. So again, you're going to see more families come, and even single adults, even with the increase in bed space, the issue is what happens when those beds are full.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is even single adults are going to be placed and released on, quote, alternatives to detention. So I just don't see the language the way that they see it. And at the end of the day, the reason, look, it actually codifies many of the Biden's bad and unlawful policies.
Yep.
So it's not a compromise, and so it's actually worse than doing nothing.
And it incentivizes child trafficking, which is just absolutely detestable and a really important point. And I'm glad you brought it up, Mark Morgan. Thank you very much for your time, as always, sir. Donald Trump was on with Maria Bartiromo this weekend. They were talking about who might be his VP pick.
When will you announce who your VP is?
Not for a while. I mean, we have so many great people in the Republican Party, but not for a while.
Well, what criteria are you using to identify who your running mate is?
Always, it's got to be one thing. It's got to be who would be a good president. I mean, you always have to think that because, you know, in case of emergency, things happen, right? No matter who you are, things happen.
This kind of works against the theory that Trump's only looking for like a suck up or somebody who's going to be completely quiet. No, he also wants somebody who can step in and be president of the United States. That's a good impulse.
It's got to be number one.
Who is your running mate?
Well, I have a lot of good people. We have a lot of really good people.
So you haven't decided who it is?
I have a lot of good ideas, but I haven't, and there's no reason to do that quickly.
So you haven't told that person?
Wait a second. Didn't he tell Brett Baer that he knew who the person was? Didn't he say that? Yeah, he said, I know who it's going to be, but I'm not going to tell you. And now he's saying, oh, so you see with this Trump brain, occasionally goes back and forth.
You're my person.
I speak to everybody. I speak to everybody. You know, I called Tim Scott this, because a lot of people like Tim Scott. I called him and I said, you're a much better candidate for me than you are for yourself. When I watched Tim, he was fine, he was good, but he was very low-key, et cetera, et cetera. I watched him in the last week defending me and sticking up for me and fighting for me. I said, man, you're a much better person for me than you are for yourself.
That's amazing. That's funny. He also mentioned Kristi Noem by name, in case you were wondering. Who should be his running mate? Message me on X. Used to be called Twitter. Let me know. What do you think? Who should be Donald Trump's running mate? I will see your messages, and then I will contemplate their merits. Coming up, the great one, Mark Levin, right here on WMAL.